Welcome back to the Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. And social media, as we all know, has dramatically changed our world. Sometimes it makes us yearn for the moments when we only knew about the lives of people closest to us. You remember those times? Aside from public figures and some occasional gossip, you had to literally call your friends and family or see them in person to learn what was happening in their lives. Connecting with new people meant leaving your house, starting a hobby, or joining a group of some sort. It also meant you had to muster up the courage to talk to a stranger. But social media and dating apps have made all of that much simpler, at least when you're glued to a screen. All it takes is the swipe of a finger to discover or connect with someone you may have never actually met in the real world. And a significant number of people are doing this. According to Pew Research, 30% of adults in the U.S. have used a dating site or app.
Tia, I am one of them. Are you?
Same.
It has us wondering, what are the real life implications? How does living in this new frontier of digital dating affect the way we interact with each other in real life? So today, on Valentine's Day Eve, we'll explore how social media and dating apps have altered our romantic relationships. And we want to hear from you. Have you found love on dating apps? Are you still looking? Call us at 313-577-1019 and join the conversation. Now, first, we want to take stock of the online world of dating and dating apps, how they've evolved and how they've changed our dating behaviors, our expectations, and even how we see the world. To do that, we're joined by Professor Stephanie Tong. She's an expert on the intersection of social media and relational communication at Wayne State University. Professor Tong, thanks for joining us on the Metro.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So first, let's go back and look at the advent of dating apps, if we could. When did they first start gaining popularity?
Yeah, so it's been a while. It was probably the early aughts when they first started to come in the scene. And then, the 2010s is when I think they really started to gain traction. For a long time, they were kind of thought of this as this kind of novel space. Very few people were on it. But now it really is kind of the go-to spot, as you guys were mentioning at the beginning.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about how the dating apps have changed over the years?
Yeah, so at the very beginning, I think we were talking about web-based dating. So if people are as old as me, I think they can remember, the web-based ones like Match.com and OkCupid, where you actually had to sit down at a computer. And then things became much more interesting when they migrated to mobile. So we're thinking now about kinds of dating apps that you can hold in the palm of your hand, the Tinder, which introduced that kind of ubiquitous swiping that's around now. And then, Bumble came on the scene. So several more, Hinge, those are the ones that I think are really popular today.
What are some of the other digital platforms people are using nowadays to meet each other outside of these dating apps that we've just discussed?
So I think dating apps have really become as we've talked about, the real popular place. But I do think that social media kind of still holds a really important role in the relational landscape. So people do treat TikTok occasionally as a dating app. There are other types of niche media that allow, different types of connection that can start as platonic friendships and then morph into romantic connections as well. And then there are some apps that allow for kind of what we call mixed mode relationships, where you might meet online or on mobile phones and then migrate into an offline meetup.
Professor Tong, I can say anecdotally that I've found certain apps to yield better results than others. I wonder if you've looked into any research on this about some apps or some platforms being more successful than others, and if so, what you think the special formula is.
You sound like a very seasoned user of these technologies.
Yes, guilty
Season.
over here.
Um, so I do think, there's a couple of things embedded in that question, which is a really interesting one. One is, what does success mean to you? Does it mean that you're making new connections and finding people to hang out with that you wouldn't normally meet? For some people, that really is the definition of success. Other people, it is a long-term relationship. I am looking for my soulmate and nothing less will do. And other people, it's more of a casual kind of, who can I find to broaden out, right, my dating network and experience new things with? So I kind of think it also depends on what and how you're using these apps and what success really means for you.
That's fair. Okay. What have been some of the biggest ways that dating apps have changed us as a society and the way that we relate to and interact with each other? Because we're hearing folks who are saying, the dating apps have ruined dating and they give us these false ideas about abundance and who's out there, and they connect us, but they disconnect us. We're going to get into all of that a little bit more soon, but maybe you could just talk more broadly about how you see the dating apps having changed us.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you from a research perspective what we think as researchers, and you can tell me as from a user perspective if it resonates with your experience. But you're right; it's kind of a double-edged sword. One of the things that dating apps are really great for is expanding our networks, pushing us to meet people that we wouldn't normally see in our daily, interactions. But that can also create this kind of, just around the corner, there's one more person I could swipe on. It could just be one more, choice that I could make. And that can be overwhelming for a lot of people, this kind of endless buffet of options. Another kind of double-edged sword of that is that, there's an emphasis on things that we wouldn't necessarily see in our offline world. So, for example, Tinder places a lot of prioritization on the visual. That profile picture really matters,
Yep.
and you better have a couple of them on your good side. And it really prioritizes the visual, which is not always the case. If you meet someone offline, there's a lot of other cues and things that you can look for in a face-to-face interaction. So that can be something to grapple with as well. It's also changed some of the dynamics around, I think, the labor of relationships and dating, which we don't talk about a whole lot. Dating is seen as this kind of fun, flirty thing. But I think apps have brought into the forefront that it takes a lot of work, to put yourself out there. You got to curate that profile. You got to respond to all the texts. You got to deal with being ghosted. And, when it's all kind of localized in one spot on your phone, that can be a lot to manage.
Yeah, that's such a great point. The laborious nature of the dating apps and the amount of time that we tend to invest in using these apps, because when you compare that to meeting a person out organically, right away you're able to assess if you're attracted to this person, if there's a little bit of chemistry. And with the dating apps, there are instead all of these steps that precede that actual meeting, which perhaps can be good if you really want to screen someone. But Professor Tong, it is also exhausting.
I don't envy you. It really can be, right? Because you feel like you have to, there's a lot of logistics, aren't there, right? We matched, now I need your number. Now let's coordinate a bunch of text messages and find a place that we can meet up on a mutual day and time. There's a lot of logistics and all that, back and forth communicating, coordination. It takes time, it takes effort. And it takes a lot of kind of sustained energy. And that's one of the themes that we're finding in some of our research studies, that there's kind of been a bit of a pushback here among online and mobile daters who are kind of fed up with the whole, back and forth. It's almost feels like a part-time job, is how a lot of our daters talk about it.
Yes, I feel seen. I mean, I'm in a relationship now, but when I was using the apps, I would say chronically, I did feel like it had turned into a side hustle. You're listening to the Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. We're discussing dating in the digital age and how dating apps have changed our behaviors and our expectations. Our guest is Professor Stephanie Tong. She's an expert in social and relational communication at Wayne State University, and we want to hear from you. Have you found love in the digital dating world? Or maybe you said no to the apps and took a traditional route like me? Tell us your experience. The number is 313-577-1019. Now, Professor Tong, we've recently seen a backlash from people who say they're done with the apps. I'm one of those people. I am pretty much over it. I think it's laborious, just like you all were saying. It takes too long. And I'm not really into all the steps that goes with it. I'm a little lazy on that part. But there are good things about these apps, as you have mentioned. How can people use the apps more thoughtfully?
Yeah, you're not lazy. It's a lot of work. You're certainly not lazy, Tia. I do think you bring up a really interesting point, is that like any sort of media use, it has to be mindful. And you have to keep in mind what's a realistic goal. If you really are using these apps hoping to find a longer term relationship, remind yourself that no matter what medium you initiate relationships in, it's going to take a minute. It's not going to, there's a lot of, I think, cultural ideas about love that, it happens, star-crossed lovers, you're going to find your soulmate. You just know it clicks. It's going to happen immediately. And for some people, maybe it does. And that's a wonderful feeling. But for most of us, relationships and love, and it's hard work. It does take effort, and media can be a tool to help us get there, but it's not necessarily going to be a quick fix.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit about it earlier, but this idea that the grass is greener on the other side. If I just swipe one more time, I might find my soulmate. I might find this human who is meant for me. How does that play into the expectations we set for our own relationships when we think about this endless options of dating?
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point. One of the things with this kind of overabundance is we get this feeling of almost like choice overload, where there's so many profiles and so many things and so many people to look at, that it's overwhelming. And I think that's actually led to what you're describing, is this people have this kind of obligation to be on these apps, but they really don't like it. And so there's been kind of a push to let them go a little bit. Some people have this kind of love-hate relationship with apps where they'll download them for a little while, use them, and then take them off their phone for a while when they need a break. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually probably a good practice to let yourself take a break from these things, especially if it starts to get to you, and kind of feed less useful, right? Dating habits. So I think that's a really important point, about how it can lead to overwhelm and sometimes a feeling of burnout.
Yeah. And Professor Tong, what does the future of dating apps and dating more broadly look like from your perspective, studying social media and communication?
I wish I had a crystal ball, but one of the things that's happening is, I think early on, just 5-10 years ago, dating apps were seen as novel. And now they are being seen kind of as this ubiquitous obligation. And so I think there is kind of a rise against that. There is a sense of fatigue. There's a sense of a little bit of burnout. And it doesn't feel as fresh. It can feel really, really difficult. And so I think we are coming up here on a wave where people are going to start questioning their connection with dating apps, the purposes, and the ways that they're using them and for what ends, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can be always good to check in with the media landscape and how we're using them to communicate and form relationships.
You're listening to The Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're discussing dating in the digital age and how dating apps have changed our behaviors and our expectations. Our guest is Professor Stephanie Tong. She's an expert in social and relational communication at Wayne State University. And we want to hear from you. Have you found love in the digital dating world? Or maybe you said no to the apps and you took a traditional route. Join the conversation. The number is 313-577-1019. Now, Professor Tong, I'd like us to shift a little bit to social media more broadly. I'm thinking about how we're constantly inundated with photos and updates about the lives of people putting their best selves out there. It is known as the highlight reel, and the title couples goals comes to mind. It's often attributed to celebrity relationships as the standard, a very unattainable one. How does this kind of admiration or obsession affect a relationship?
Oh, yeah. Hashtag couples goals. I think one of the things that social media does is it kind of makes things feel much more organic than they really are, just as a whole. It allows us to think that we're getting these little glimpses into people's lives as they are. And we all kind of buy into that narrative, I think, when we're scrolling through our feeds. But, in actuality, it is best for us to remember that it's not that way. So that couple's goal might actually be something that looks really great. And maybe that is how these people live, but probably not on a day-to-day basis. They're not going to post their argument that they just had about, the dirty socks that you left on the living room floor. That's not a goal we all want, but it's certainly something we live with. And so, social media can exacerbate that tendency to idealize. But at the same time, it frames it as this very kind of organic, everyday, mundane thing when that's probably not always the truth.
And we know everyone doesn't use social media the same way, right? Some people are posting their relationships, the highlight reels of those relationships, as we've discussed, and they're celebrating their partners. But if couples are approaching this differently, can you talk about the kinds of conflicts that can arise?
Yeah, my students and I talk about this a lot in our classes because they're very much, Gen Z social media users. One that comes up a lot is how social media can create a sense of romantic jealousy. One phenomenon that tends to be pretty prevalent is this kind of sense of wedging, where, you're in a committed relationship, but there's somebody that is just posting a lot on your partner's page and liking a lot of their photos. And, it's literally driving a wedge between you and your significant other. And they're just kind of a little too much involvement on my partner's feed. And that can create a sense of romantic jealousy for sure.
Yes, I think that it's hard not to, if you are a social media user and your partner is as well, and you start seeing this common pattern, this thread, this same person all the time liking everything and commenting, it may drive you a little crazy.
Or even if your partner's the one doing some of the extra liking on other posts, that gets a little testy too.
Oh, gosh. And then it's like, get me out of this world.
Yep. One of my goals truly is to date someone who does not have social media at all. So then we just
that's
have
a couple's
that
goal.
Yeah.
All right, listeners, listen up. Tia's going to give you her list. And one of those things is that you don't use social media.
Or very little, very light usage of social media, but nothing like on it all the time. I mean, that's when I think problems really start to start.
Okay, if you are an extraordinary human being and you don't use social media, you can call in and maybe we will consider setting you up on a date with Tia Graham. Maybe, but I'm going to have to do a very thorough vetting process.
I don't even think our producers will let that happen. I'm going to tell you that right now. They would have to go through every producer we have, and then
all the big brothers.
All the big brothers would have to go through, and you're not getting through that.
And then
line.
the big sister.
The big sister. So you're not getting through the line. Sorry.
Okay, well, Let's give folks some hope here. What can people who are dating do to minimize social media's influence in their relationships? As Professor Tong, Tia, and I are talking about right now, it can feel like a little too much sometimes.
Well, I know you guys are joking and it can feel like that, but I actually think this conversation raises a really interesting point. And it's something that, my students and I talk about as well, is to bring it out in the open. Don't let that feeling of annoyance just kind of like fester and create tension in the relationship. If you're seeing it, have an open conversation about it and discuss what's going on, like what is happening. It might not be what you think, right? Or you might be kind of blowing it out of proportion. And so I think some of these things just kind of have to be negotiated between romantic partners, just like anything else.
Before we let you go, Professor Tong, would you give us, a few things to marinate on to close things out about what you see as some of the true pros, the progress that technology and this digital age have brought us when it comes to relating with each other and dating?
I really do think it has changed the way we think about relationships and dating. I do think it has put more of a lens on choices and choice making and initiation, and how both kind of labor intensive that process can be, but also how fun that stage can be, because that really is kind of the emphasis on dating. So if you're in that stage, and Valentine's Day is just around the corner, I would say enjoy it, have fun. Because you're only in that stage for a little while.
Professor Stephanie Tong is an expert on social media and relational communication at Wayne State University. Professor Tong, it is always a pleasure to have you on the Metro. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Coming up on the Metro, we'll continue our conversation about dating in the digital world. And we want to hear from you. Have you found love on dating apps or websites? Tell us your experience. The number is 313-577-1019. Stay with us on the Metro. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Metro. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We've been discussing dating in the digital age and how social media can shape our romantic relationships. It's created a world that provides us a lot of choice in potential partners. But there are ways in real life to quickly filter through your dating prospects and find your person too. I'm talking about speed dating, which might not be the perfect solution, but our next guest created a way to make the search a little more fun.
That's right, Robin. Aqua Tofana is a comedian and the host of Match Made on Stage, a show in which attendees sign up to speed date in front of an audience. Ooh, Aqua joins us now. Aqua, welcome to the Metro.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Now we're going to get in this hot seat now. Where did you get the idea for this show?
So actually, this show was created by a lovely human named Shrima, and they have actually created a whole production for speed dating. So Match Made on Stage is a whole conglomerate, and there's quite a few different shows that you can do trying to find, hopefully the love of your life. So Match Made on Stage is a program that happens at Planet Ant in Hamtramck. on stage in front of a live audience where we have 2 contestants that are blindfolded that we pre-screened. So we ask them questions in front of the audience, kind of get them to, share some stories, make a connection. We've got the audience involvement. And then at the very end, we reveal them to each other. And we try to follow up about a week or so later to see how the date went and if anything came from it. The show that I host specifically is Secret Admirers, which is specifically targeted towards the LGBTQIA plus community. So this way, we're doing it kind of like a throwback. If you remember those old dating shows where people couldn't see each other, but the audience could see them. So we've got one person behind a curtain, and they are talking to this entire live audience that we have. And if there's anyone in the audience who is interested in our dater, all they have to do is send them a little note, and we have them meet at the very end, and we reveal what the dater looks like. This happens at Bolero, which is in Royal Oak. It is a bowling lanes and lounge. So if we find people who hit it off, we have what we call a honeymoon lane. So they can get to know each other a little bit after the show, bowl together, or even have their friends join them. So it's just like one big party. And then one of the most newer ones we have is called Wanna Ride. And it is a social show for cyclists. So people are bringing their bikes, and they're also trying to find love. And we do have a show tomorrow on Valentine's Day, which is the Match Made Speed Dates that happens at the Congregation in Detroit. And that is like a rapid fire where we try to get as many people on stage as possible and try to make as many love connections before the stroke of midnight. So that way people have time to find love. So really, if it wasn't for Shrima, there would be none of these shows going on. So I feel like in today's day and age, it's super easy just to download an app and actually never meet a person. Whereas this is kind of taking it back to, the 60s, the 70s, when those dating shows were super popular and hot.
Exactly, Aqua. So we were just talking about dating apps with Professor Tong. We're going to ask you a little bit about that as well, your experience personally. But I do want to ask you just about the idea of 2 random strangers on a stage for the first time. This date sounds like a perfect recipe for some awkward moments. I know myself, I will probably be sweating bullets the whole time. So is there any particular moment from the show that sticks out to you as something that was just a little too awkward for you?
Oh, well, the first show we had, I hosted it with the lovely Whitney Naomi and a local comedian, Joe Awesome. And we had a dater. I cannot recall her name off the top of my head, and I am so sorry about that. But one of the questions, because this is like an adult show, is where is the most courageous place you've ever baked cookies? If you get my drift.
Oh, this is coded. Okay.
Yes. We get that.
I don't know what the
That's adorable.
It
We'll
was
take
great.
it.
Yep.
We'll take
for
it.
radio is. So I'm trying not
That was
to get you guys in trouble.
But
that was sufficient.
Can I make something clear, though? I make jokes with Tia all the time about the actual cookies that she bakes. And I want listeners to know we are normally talking about cookies that you consume with chocolate chips in them. But please go on.
Well, you guys can't see me, but I'm like a chocolate chip and a cookie. So that's but we asked, where is the most courageous place you and your partner have, baked your cookies? And she said, in the living room next to her mother-in-law. And the follow-up question to that is how?
And why?
Well, her mother-in-law was blind.
The awkward silence right now is how you probably felt when you heard this story. My goodness.
But as a comedian, you also probably ran with this and loved it, I'm guessing.
Oh, it was amazing.
Oh my gosh.
It was amazing. Like the whole show, it kept coming back to that mother-in-law because that's not something that leaves your mind. It's been months since that show happened, and I think about it on a weekly basis.
I
At
think we're going to
minimum.
be haunted by that.
I know.
also.
I'm thinking about that emoji with that, the face of this, the teeth. Like, oh gosh, what's happening? Oh wow.
Well, and like just my thing is because it was two women, and it was like, oh, the mother-in-law is blind, and I'm like, yeah, but I'm just waiting for the day where she's on her deathbed and right before the end, she goes, by the way, I heard everything. I'm not deaf.
Mic drop.
Mic drop. Oh my gosh, Aqua. Now we're all just a little bit uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable.
Just a little bit. But that's exactly how that feels today in this world today.
You
a little
asked the
awkward.
question. I gave you an answer. We're all going to suffer together. This is a bonding experience.
Oh my gosh, yes. I feel like we are really bounded right now. But just sticking on the topic, of course, of dating and the way things have been going for all of us in this world. We're talking about how social media and dating apps have shaken up the dating world. So I want to know about your personal experience using dating apps. Do you use them? Have you had success using dating apps? And what's your just thoughts and opinion on them?
Oh, girl. I love the stories of people who have used dating apps and they have found the love of their life and they're now married with beautiful children, living a beautiful life. I love that for them. I have not come anywhere close to that type of experience on these dating apps.
Me neither.
Because I feel like the issue with the dating apps is unfortunately, I date men. It's not something I'm proud of. So you get men who are on these dating apps who they'll talk to you every day. They'll say good morning, good night, and they'll say all the right things. But when it comes to actually meeting in person and actually putting, the words to some work, I feel like a lot of times people chicken out. They like the fantasy of talking to someone without actually knowing the human they're talking to. So I feel like these in-person dating shows is a great way for us to be reminded that we are talking to actual humans. These aren't just bots. They're not just robots. There's feelings and emotions, and there's a lot, that goes into making a relationship work. And I guess I'm just skeptical that you can pertain all of that on texting or phone calls. So, I mean, I've met some nice people on the apps. I've had some great dinners and found some new coffee spots. But at the end of the day, we're not looking for a free meal. We're looking for hopefully the person we want to spend the rest of our life with. And I feel like dating apps had their time. During COVID was great, when we were all grounded and we couldn't, leave the house. But now that the world is trying to go back to normal, I feel like we need to put the human experience back into dating and take it offline.
Aqua, I love that so much. And I have found some really great restaurants and places to shop through dating apps. So that's a plus there. You're listening to the Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. We're talking about how social media and dating apps influence our relationships. And we're wondering, have you found love online? Let us know. Give us a call. The number is 313-577-1019. Let's go to a caller, Fred from Columbus. Fred, have you found love online?
Well, let me just say this. I have found love online, but it's been another country. So one thing about dating is this, is that people got to remember, no matter what type dating app that you use, you bring in the country's culture. And that's why, particularly with people of color, you bring in U.S. history with you. It just trying to get past that window of trust online is difficult. But what I found out, if you set your goals on Eastern Europe, the people are very open. They're very trusting. They're very family focused and want family. Same thing in the African countries. So you have to keep that in mind. And I do think if you meet a person in person, it kind of cuts through the cultural mistrust or whatever words you want to put to. But again, remember, whatever different type of dating app that you're using, you're bringing in that culture, and people are going to hold on to their culture, particularly when you can kind of be behind the screen. So, yeah.
Fred, thanks so much for giving us a call here on the Metro. And our guest is Aqua Tofana, host of Match Made on Stage, which is a live dating show in Detroit. Aqua, we want to know what dating method you prefer. I mean, you just did a bit of disparaging of the apps, which is very understandable. And I think that many of us can relate. And Tia and I were nodding our heads, and we're sure some listeners were as well. Would you rather go on a dating app for your next date or go on your show?
I mean, I've been trying to date for money on the apps, and it hasn't worked out. So
For money. Wait, say more.
Going for love.
Say more about that.
I mean, when I was a younger lady, I was probably more focused with getting into the life insurance policies than I was, getting into an actual real relationship. And I feel like there are some dating apps if you're looking for more financial stability in a partner, which, do what you got to do. I feel like everyone has their own type of arrangements, but I feel like if I wanted to actually fall in love, then I hope to fall in love at one of the shows I host. That would be so convenient for me. I'm a very, very busy woman. So if I could just have someone fall into my lap while I'm working, that would make my life a lot easier.
Literally could they fall into your lap, and then you could have this adorable origin story of how you two met.
Can I tell you a story about how I almost thought I had a neighbor who was the love of my life?
Yes.
Go on.
Yeah, so I moved into a new apartment, and I noticed this, tall neighbor, good head of hair, nice face, looked like he went to the gym. So, if he can put up with going to the gym every day and, getting sweaty and getting frustrated, then he can put up with me. That's my way of thinking. And I know what you're thinking. Dating a neighbor probably isn't smart, but hear me out. They are conveniently close. They have no convictions, and they make 3 times the rent. So checking all the boxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking this could be my love story. I could have a man across the hall. I've been praying. I was like, you know what? Just send me one, and I don't want to have to look for him right there. This man likes to blast his music at 1:00 in the morning when coming home from said gym. So he is no longer the love of my life. This is now my new arch nemesis.
I was going to say enemy number 1.
I mean, he showed you his true colors without you even having to do the vetting process. So I guess he did you a favor. Aqua Tofana, host. We have run out of time, but we have so loved having you on the program. Aqua is the host of Match Made on Stage. It's a live dating show in Detroit. Aqua, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you so much for having me. We have a free show tonight at Bolero in Royal Oak. We would love for you guys to come out, and who knows, maybe you'll find the love of your life. Let me play your Cupid the night before Valentine's Day.
Aw, that's adorable. Thanks, Aqua.
Thank you.
Coming up on the Metro, we'll talk with an unofficial matchmaker who has successfully set up 5 couples who all went on to get married. She'll tell us what she learned about love and relationships along the way. And of course, we want to hear from you. Have you found love in the digital dating world? The number is 888-577-1019.
It's the Metro on WDET. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. We've been discussing dating and relationships in the digital age. I am still laughing, Robin from Aqua. How social media can affect our romantic dynamics. And we've discussed how dating apps can connect us with so many people, and yet they can do so much damage too. That's because they can create the illusion of abundance. In other words, with so many choices at our fingertips, the absolute perfect person must be right out there, right?
Well, it's a perception, Tia, that makes it hard for some of us to stay open to possibility. Possibility that the right person for us might not be exactly what we envisioned or expected. This is something Erin Stiebel, a Southfield resident, has stressed to the couples she's matched. Now, Stiebel will be the first one to tell you she's no official matchmaker. She's a Jewish educator, a wife, and a mom of 5. But she's connected 5 couples who've gone on to fall in love and get married. And she's learned a lot about love and relationships along the way. So we have her here with us today to share some of that wisdom. Erin, welcome to the Metro.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
So Erin, first things first, you're not a matchmaker by trade, but you seem to really have a knack for knowing what kind of people are compatible with each other. When did you first match a successful couple?
I have the privilege of knowing a lot of people. I consider myself a connector. I love getting to know people. I always quote my grandmother who said, "I never knew a stranger. Everyone is a person you can get to know." And through meeting people, you learn that really it's very easy to connect people. You just have to look a little bit deeper. And I think that when I was in the stage of life where I was personally dating, I was in my early 20s looking to find my spouse, I realized that so many of my friends and I were dating similar people, we're getting to know other people, and just because someone's not your husband doesn't mean he's not your friends. So we started making connections. You meet somebody at a convention, at a conference, it's just another opportunity to connect them. So my first time setting someone up was between 2 friends. One I knew from college and one I had known from spending a gap year overseas. And they hit it off, and I had the privilege of dancing at their wedding. It was an amazing moment.
Wow, that's so great that it came full circle. And before we get into some of the wisdom that you have gathered from matching people in an unofficial capacity, I'm wondering, did it ever cross your mind when you were matching people and watching them hit it off that you could have made a successful profession out of this?
It has been suggested, why don't you become a professional matchmaker? I think that people who go into this business professionally are incredible and are heroes. I happen to love my job. I have the privilege of teaching Jewish people about their very rich heritage and connecting them to the traditions that have always been theirs, and they might not have ever had a chance to learn about them. So to me, that's where my passion is. But through my job as a Jewish educator, we host Shabbat meals every single week. We have guests around our table who come from all walks of life, and it's beautiful watching people connect and make connections at our table. So I think that I get to play an unofficial matchmaker in a way that sometimes feels less pushy and less intimidating than a formal matchmaker might be.
But has it always been super easy to connect people? I mean, I'm wondering if you can think back to matching a couple where it required some real work on your part.
Yes. Well, I think that people are sometimes resistant to ideas if you suggest a name of someone that they know. The Jewish matchmaking system is remarkable. It actually traces all the way back to the Bible, to the Torah, where we actually see Abraham have his assistant, Eliezer, help him find a match for his son, Isaac. And the matchmaking system has really pursued and been something that's a critical, integral piece of the Jewish community that I live in and so many Jewish communities across the world, where you see someone says, I'm of age, I'm ready to find my partner, I'm ready to build a beautiful home. These are the qualities, these are the values, these are the things that are important to me. And so by the time you actually end up on a first date with somebody, you already know so much about who they are as a person, what they stand for, what sort of home they want to build. You're sitting across from somebody who is surely compatible on paper. It's just about seeing if you connect at the next level. So I do think that the system itself sets people up for success. The challenge I find is that if you have an idea and you suggest it to somebody, they might say, I already know them. I know we're so aligned. I know we have similar values. I know we're coming from the same place, but it's not a good idea, trust me. And they get trapped in a perception they have of a person that might not be accurate now, today. They might know them from 10 years ago when they overlapped in high school. They might know them from a different stage of life or from just bumping into them in the community and having certain perceptions. But often the beauty of the matchmaking system is that you don't end up sitting across from somebody who is not a potential candidate for marriage. You sit across from someone knowing that they are also marriage-minded and that they have similar trajectory and a similar plan of what they want their home to look like. And you know you have this sort of starting point that allows the process to progress much more quickly.
You're listening to The Metro. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Tia Graham. In this hour, we've been talking about dating in the digital age, and now we're taking it back to the basics and talking about the time-honored tradition of matchmaking. Erin Stiebel is our guest. She's a Southfield resident and an unofficial matchmaker. We're discussing what she's learned about love and relationships from the 5 couples she's matched. Now, Erin, you're a Jewish educator and you are really involved in the Jewish community. You talked just a little bit about that. Have all the couples you've matched so far also been Jewish?
Yes, they all have been Jewish. I have to admit, all the couples that I've set up, I set up when I was living back in New York, when I was still single. I have had zero luck since I moved here to Michigan and since I've been married. But it doesn't mean I don't try. I actually just sat down with a friend a few weeks ago. I have a spreadsheet, a Google spreadsheet on my computer where I really just import men, women, people that I've met along the way. And when I talk to them, I say, what are you looking for? What ideal age range? What are deal breakers for you? How can we help you find somebody? And I try to keep track of people. And so I sat down with a friend and she said, I have all of these people that I know that are single and I would love to set them up. Can I pass their names along to you? And so my database of people is, thank God, growing. And then you just have to sort of think about it. Like, I just heard about this person, maybe she's a good match for that person. And it just requires taking time. There are people who, really dedicate hours of their lives. And in the Jewish community, I think we all sort of view it as a value to help the next generation establish Jewish homes. And so while there are formal matchmakers and this is their full-time job, I think that most people consider themselves, a matchmaker on the side, trying to just set people up when they think of an idea and try to move it forward. A colleague of mine spends an hour every single night just meeting people, speaking to people, trying to connect them where she can.
And Erin, do you think it's harder or easier for people trying to date within their faith or race or ethnicity to find love?
I think that we are living in a time where people are trying to connect with something familiar. And I do think that tradition and religion is something that feels very important as a person thinks about establishing their home. They come back to traditions such as holidays, values, stories, where their family came from and originated from. And when you sit across from someone who has shared experiences or understands the language, that shared language is an immediate point of connection. So when I set people up, I really only have looked within the immediate Jewish community, but I find that even if people are coming from one city or another, one level of observance or another, they have so much shared language to begin a conversation that it's already a different discussion.
And our last question to you, Erin, before we wrap things up, what are some lessons on love and relationship that you've learned along the way that you carry with you today and then you still spread to others?
Well, everything can have potential. Don't give a no. I actually reached out to an old friend from high school last night. I said, I have a girl I'd love to introduce you to. I think she's wonderful. I think you're wonderful. I would love for you to meet. And I was so impressed with him. He said, if you think it's a good idea, I trust you. I think that when someone in our life knows you, they're invested in you, they've gotten a chance to know you, give it a chance. Don't say no to an idea just because you have a conception of what it could be or what it isn't. There are so many opportunities. People grow, people evolve, and so do our images of them. So love can really come anywhere. Just find someone that you have shared values with. And I see it now in my home. I have a wonderful husband who is a native Michigander. I am not. I am the transplant over here. But we are raising a home where our children are being raised with our shared values of love and investment and potential and seeing the good in each and every one of them. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to be a part of.
Thank you so much to Erin Stiebel, a Jewish educator and an unofficial matchmaker. Erin, once again, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you. And if you're Jewish and if you're looking for a match, feel free to reach out.
The Metro is produced by Sam Corey, Carrie Jr. II, and Jack Philbrandt. Our engineer is Nate Bender. Our senior producer is David Lyons. The Metro is a production of WDET, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation.